It's now my honor to bring forward Janice McDonald, an award-winning entrepreneur, leader, champion for women, diversity and inclusion, and a celebrated author for a very special part of our program. Janice.
Oops. Gotta do my Face ID. So it's very fitting that I'm here tonight celebrating the launch of my new book, Fearless. The book, like tonight's event, is directly the result of collaboration, determination, and huge effort. Thank you, Michael Tremblay, Sonia Shorey, and of course the whole team here at Invest Ottawa for making tonight possible. My biggest thanks goes out to all the women, many of whom are here tonight, and I would ask you to stand. Those that are featured in the book, please stand. Hey, Laura. There's lots. You agreed to share your candid and inspiring stories, and I'm so grateful. This book is about celebrating the fearless girl in all of us. When I think of a fearless woman, various things come to mind. Perhaps she has tales of remarkable exploits, has overcome incredible challenges, or has soared to great heights. Her courage may be shown in other ways too, small and quiet feats of Wonder Woman, as opposed to Herculean, strength, displayed simply by putting one foot in front of the other. This book has long been a dream of mine, and I brought it into the world as a way to shine a spotlight on the experiences of diverse women. Fearless is a collaborative effort created to share authentic women's stories on how we've evolved from our earliest days. Together, those features in these pages are an inspiring collection of different accomplishments, backgrounds, and experiences. The first person featured in the book needs no introduction. She's an absolutely inspiring trailblazer, and I'm so grateful to have her here. Please welcome Katie Telford, Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Welcome, Katie. If I can get the microphone. There we go. All right. Thank you. Oops. Get my tech ready. So, Katie.
Hi.
You're fearless. You're phenomenal.
Thank you.
And you're here. And,
I am.
And you have so much that you're doing. You're leading our country in support with our Prime Minister. Take me back to the early days of Katie, that 10-year-old you, that fearless girl. What was that girl like?
So just a few years ago. No. I was actually telling a member of my team, and a few of the members of my team came out tonight, which thank you to them for that. I have a great team, and we were talking about some of this, and I said, you know, when I was 11, as you featured me in the book, I would not have come dressed like this, nor would I have been wearing a ponytail. I would have been in a turtleneck if I was speaking publicly, because I did do public speaking contests as a young woman, but I would, or as a girl even, but I would get extraordinarily nervous, and the way I would show it, which I may or may not be showing it now, I've just decided to get used to it when it's happening, is my neck would go totally red. So my way of dealing with it was to always wear a turtleneck. That doesn't work at all times of year. So my other way of dealing was to always have your hair down and around. And as some of you remarked when I first walked in the room, so I can tell who the social media types are who follow political types, there was a bit of a thing yesterday on social media where a particular a man on Twitter decided to say that I was too old to wear a ponytail. So of course, me and my team decided I had to wear a ponytail tonight, regardless of my neck.
Yes, we love that.
But I think I was someone who knew that I wanted to have my voice heard, but was much more methodical and planned, and would get nervous about the nerves, as opposed to now trying to embrace the nerves as much as possible and think, maybe you've got those butterflies for a reason because you're doing a really good thing and it's okay.
And I like to think of it as it means it's something important to me.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So I love the idea that we need to find ways to bring more women into the political sphere and in civic discourse. What's it going to take? And are there any myths you want to demystify about public service? So especially on a night like tonight when we have so many amazing women leaders here, that we can attract more women.
So I think it's going to take a lot more hard work. It's going to take all of us, and as was just being said by one of the few, and thank you to the few men in the room who are allies and partners of ours in advancing women in all kinds of different places. It is going to take that partnership, and it's going to take a relentlessness about just continuing to push forward. And when I walked in the room, I am thrilled that I've already had a few people hand me their cards and say, I'm thinking about a career pivot, or I'd like to get involved somehow. How do I get involved? And we try as much as possible to follow up on those. And what I would just say is keep being relentless about that. Nominate your friends. Think of your family members and your partners, whether they be business or personal life. And don't think that public service is something for those people over there while you're in the private sector over here. Because one of the ways that we're going to bridge these divides, and we're going to actually hopefully help with a lot of those numbers, and I'm hoping those numbers are actually going to help the public service as well, is for people to kind of to cross between the two. And that was what I really enjoy about your book, because I have had a chance to flip through it already, is just how many different sectors you have represented in there. And how many people, like Chris Whitecross, who I just see flashing across the screen, the amount I have learned from the group of women who are known as the AWWR, the Awesome Women with Rank, that I have gotten to know. You can really learn from women in all different parts. And I think, breaking out of silos is one of the things. Public service too often has become siloed, and that is something that the only way we will break it down is by not seeing it as something real, but as invisible barriers that we just have to walk right through.
Mm-hmm. Well, and thank you for mentioning the diversity in the book, because the goal really was to make it look like Canada, and I think that's what we've achieved. There's people from all different backgrounds and so that and perspectives, and I think that's exciting. Our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, has been very vocal that he's a feminist. As someone who's been in politics since your early 20s, how does it feel to work with a feminist Prime Minister?
Easier.
Say more.
So I would say, I guess, two things. So going to the earlier days, where it genuinely was easier was when and it was actually one of the reporters featured in your book, Susan Delacourt, and a couple of others who caught on to the fact that there were perhaps some individuals who were older than I and men who said, does she have enough experience to be doing this role for you? And this was back in early campaign director of his leadership days. And he said, that's what excites me, actually, is when people challenge her, because I think they're challenging me when they do that. And when he really became an ally and partner by saying something like that. I think also him ensuring that you can say anything at the table, and that he wants to hear how your story is perhaps different than what the story around the table is often being told. And so that encouragement, that providing a platform, and most importantly, the embracing or trying to embrace where he can, where the critiques come unfairly, and saying, I want to take that on as my challenge, and it's not just your challenge. I think that's what makes it easier.
Yeah, talk about, we know there's a lot of keyboard courage in social media. You talked about it yesterday with the ponytail. What's your advice? We have amazing women leaders here in the room and aspiring leaders. What's your advice in terms of how do you handle criticism? Obviously, in your role, it's coming at you. So how do you handle it?
So it's something I think we're all still learning how to handle. And I'm sure many of you, if you're on social media, you experience it at times. If you do put yourself into public office, they experience it in a way that I don't fortunately have to deal with, though there are moments where I get a lot of it. And in the last week, for whatever reason, posting great numbers, great results around poverty numbers and showing that our poverty numbers were decreasing just brought out a level of animosity on social media that I wasn't anticipating. And it caused me to actually think about this question, not knowing you were going to ask it tonight, over the last week, and to reflect on, when do you push back? When do you ignore? When do you kind of let it roll off? Can you always let it roll off? And because I often do get a lot of unsolicited feedback online, some of it's super helpful, some of it not. But some people very sincerely will even message me offline that I don't know and say, don't give them any attention. And the few times that I do, I don't on a regular basis retweet or talk about the criticisms on there, because I actually love interacting on social media for the most part. I have met some phenomenal women over social media. And actually the ponytail thing became entertaining. And I came into the office this morning and both men and women in my office were commenting on it because they were just loving some of the responses. People were posting pictures of themselves in their ponytails going to work this morning in honor of the ponytail gate. And I had no idea what I was starting there. But I think, on the one hand, you want to let as much of it as possible go because you don't want to highlight it. You don't want to make it into this even more toxic place because there are so many good conversations and connections being made there. So I think two things. One is highlight the good that is on there. Develop the communities that you can find on there because they really are on there. I've met so many women in person where I say, I feel like I know you already. And yet I've really, truly only met them over social media, and I've learned about their lives and their careers through how they have posted things. And so I think highlighting the good, once in a while though, highlighting some of the challenges is really important. Because interestingly, even with, not to dwell on the ponytail thing too much, but it's recent. But the number of people who said to me, oh, I'm so sorry you're having to deal with that. And to me, the ponytail thing was nothing. That was me poking fun compared to a lot of what I would never retweet or post. And people will say to me, why don't you report that? Well, because unless it's actual violent threat, they can't really do much, or at least to date, most of the social media platforms haven't figured out what to do with that. And so the best I can do with that is to just shrug it off and tell my mother to never check my feed.
And by the way, ponytails are a very practical hairstyle for we women, right? We're very happy to have those. So what's something that you wish you knew earlier?
I think something that I have learned over the years, and I think it's something we all continue to learn as we go through experiences, but is how to get comfortable in the uncomfortable. And it's not just, public speaking for those of us who might get butterflies. It's also in the big moments. When you fail at something, whether it be a campaign or whether, in my case, I've had a few of those that didn't work out, or whether it's a specific event or policy that you really thought was going to achieve something and then didn't achieve what you thought it was going to do. Getting comfortable with not only the fact that that happens, but realizing actually, and it's so much easier said than when you look back on something, but realizing also that those are the moments you probably learn the most from, because you're forced to kind of take stock in a way that you often don't do. I have to force myself when something goes really well, when we won a majority in 2015, or when a policy is successful. You have to kind of force yourself and your team to sit back and say what worked, whereas it's natural for a team to say what went wrong. And so you oftentimes do learn so much more from those hard moments and those uncomfortable moments, and realizing that those moments, they may add up, and sometimes there's many in a row, but that they are going to take you somewhere because you are learning so much from those experiences, that failure is not only okay, but something that is just going to happen. And it's the only real path to success is to face some hurdles. And I don't think that is something, and I know in entrepreneur life, that is something that is learned quickly, oftentimes, and is something that is taught, but it is not something that I feel like I learned through, the education system when I was in it, or through family and friends. It was something that I learned through experience.
Well, and you, speaking of education, you were at Ottawa U, an amazing debater. So I'm not going to take you on here now, that's for sure. President of Debating Club too. But you're talking about failure. But What about, you're in this incredible role, very demanding, but you're also a mother. And that's incredible pressure to try and balance it all. How are you managing that? How do you keep that, and also, how's family life in politics?
So I think there's a lot of different things. There's no one answer, I think, to how do you manage family life in a pressure cooker job that we all have in different ways at different points in our life. And that's where I love the expression that I learned from many different women over time, and there's many different versions of this, from work-life fluidity to work-life mix, and I've heard all kinds of different versions of that, as opposed to ever trying to say work-life balance, because I think there's no perfect balance. There are times where work is going to be a much bigger part of your life, and there are times where your family is going to be a much bigger, during a maternity leave, though that was when Justin Trudeau asked me to get involved in running his leadership campaign. And I said, I'm on maternity leave, but I like that you just asked me, and then went on to do it. But in some ways, because I started in maternity leave, this has been a part of George, my son, who's 8 now. It has been a part of his life since he was very, very young. And something I was determined to do from the very beginning, and continue to do, and I've actually been doing a lot recently because of the strike days, is to bring him along to work. And he learns a lot at work. So while he's not maybe getting the math and the reading that I was hoping he'd be getting at school, he has been coming in and learning all kinds of things about briefings on all kinds of issues that you've seen in the news recently. So I feel like that's just, a different form of education for the moment. But
I saw him clearing the plates.
Yeah, well, he's got
chores
in his,
when he comes in.
Yeah, he's a junior staffer in the office when he's there, and given specific assignments, including, if you want to be in this meeting, you cannot say a word. But sometimes he will choose, and then sometimes he will lean over and say, I'm going to leave this one. It's like, okay, fair enough. And then the other thing is making sure you surround yourself with, whether it's family or friends, but having a network of people that support you throughout. And in my case, I am very, very fortunate to have a husband, a partner who is right now taking my son over to Kids CrossFit, not far away from here, and he understands that this is something that's very important to me and supports me in this journey. But whether it is girlfriends who support you in that, or whether it is extended family, making sure that you have a circle of people, or it doesn't need to be only girlfriends. It can be men in your life who support you to ensure that you can keep following your passion.
So the title of the book is Fearless. The book opens with you. You're the first of 80 women that we feature. Take us back to a time you were fearless. What's your most recent or one that comes to mind, a fearless time for Katie?
So I'm going to give you 2 quick ones. One is in the last year, almost year. You may all know that there was a bit of a political firestorm going on for my government about a year ago, and it went on for many months. And that put me in a situation where I actually felt, to a degree, fearful from being able to go out and speak in public for a while. And it's a careful line I was walking always as a political staffer who's seen as somebody who's supposed to be in the back rooms, traditionally speaking. And I very much went out of my way when I came back into sort of what I called my next sort of life as a political staffer in this role, because I'd been in and out of politics and different political staffer roles for a number of years, as you pointed out. And I made a point, though, when I became Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister and realized there'd only been one woman before me, and it was quite some time ago, that one of the ways we were going to achieve diversity and inclusion, I believe, and with the support of my colleagues and of my boss, was to ensure that we started talking more publicly about the profession of being a political staffer, so that those who didn't know somebody, so that it wasn't simply a job where you had to know somebody to get the job, or even to know about the job and to understand what the job was. But that I also believe in the see her to be her model, and so that it was important to get out there and talk about these kinds of roles, that I really do need more women and more diversity generally putting up their hands, and or we need to go to events and find them and recruit them in to be able to join. And it was in the last year, when headlines strike of a certain variety, it was very easy and difficult at the same time on a personal level to retreat, because there were a whole lot of reasons that staff go back into those back rooms and just power through. And so my commitment to myself coming out of the election and going into 2020 was to be fearless again on this point. And so I'm starting with your event tonight, and I'm hoping to get back out there, and also to encourage my colleagues to get back out there, and not just get back out there. In some cases, it's for the first time. There is no reason the young women in my office aren't out there as well, speaking on panels and speaking at events and talking about what it is to work in public service for the reasons you asked about earlier. It's an important place for us to have a diversity of voices, and I think the only way we do that is to not allow ourselves to get holed away for too long. Sometimes, obviously, it gets busy, and we can't get away. But there's a lot of us, and there's always got to be a way to have our voices heard, especially when the goal is to bring more voices in, which will hopefully help us get through many more things. But the second one, which is a bit of a more traditional answer, I think, to things, is in some ways it's the imposter syndrome that strikes so many women in particular. And I remember the first time I heard it, I thought, well, I haven't had that. And who's kidding who? I think everybody's actually had it, and I've had it all kinds of times. And my husband actually reminded me when I came home from an event and said, have I had imposter syndrome at some point? And he said, yes. And he said, morning after the election, 2015, I had a text message from the then all of a sudden Prime Minister saying, could you come and talk to me for a minute? And my husband looked at me and said, he's going to ask you to be his chief of staff. And I said, no, he's not. And for a variety of reasons, even though so often I couldn't stand the expression about my boss that was used for years ahead of him becoming prime minister, of how he needs to fill the suit more, because it was really code for he needs to be a certain type. And so even though I was somebody who'd pushed back against things like that, in my own mind in that moment, knowing all of the experiences I had and the relationship I had with him, I still thought, no, there's some kind of experience that I don't have, so he must turn somewhere else. And it took me a little bit to kind of get comfortable with, oh no, he really did just ask me to do this, and I'm really going to say yes.
Well, I think it's something many women can relate to, so thank you for sharing that. I'm going to invite our other three guests up, and while they're coming up, Helen, Aaron, and Solange, I'd like to hear your I'd like to ask you your final question, and this comes from my Fearless Women podcast. Katie, what is your dream for Canada?
So an easy, small question. I think my dream for Canada, and I think this has been the case for a little while now, but it's particularly been formed over the last 4 years, and going to events like this, and an increasing number of events like this, which is something to be really, really hopeful and inspired about, is that we keep going the way we're going. And I don't mean that in a partisan or political sense. I mean that in terms of, the words that you had on the screen, and I love belonging, and I was thinking about that as I saw it on the screen, diversity and inclusion and belonging, and that I need to work that into how I'm thinking and how we're looking at things. We've talked a lot about retention, and I much prefer the word belonging. I think not allowing ourselves in a time in the world where it would be very easy for us to take a step back or a step sideways to ensure that we continue to, as one of the earlier speakers said, put one foot in front of the other, especially on issues like this that are so important to our success overall, whether it's dealing with the virus, whether it's dealing with any number of other issues that have come up in 2020. It's been a long year already. It's
just March.
And it's just March. But I think we will be better for having greater diversity, inclusion, and belonging in all of our organization, in all of our levels of government, throughout the private sector and the public sector. And so to just keep going would be my dream for Canada.
Thank you for sharing your beautiful dream. So, Katie, thank you so much. And thank you again, Katie, and I'll invite our three other speakers, 3 women featured in Fearless, to come on up. Who's going to go first?
I can go first.
All right. So first up,
it over
Erin. Sure. Okay. So each of these women are featured in the book, and they're going to give us a little overview on the Fearless experience and what it means to them.
Yeah, so I actually want to start off with just how I know Janice. So 6 or 7 years ago, I was about to graduate University of Ottawa Comms, holler to the other GGs in the room. And I was about to graduate with no real work experience and no clear vision of what I wanted to do next. And that's when an amazing professor of mine introduced me to Janice. And it's really no exaggeration to say that Janice changed the course of my life. She introduced me to entrepreneurship. She introduced me to so many kick-ass women here. And she really challenged me. She inspired me and continues to do so. She also coached me through so many mistakes, like really the bad, tough advice that you don't want to hear but desperately need. That was Janice. And she always emboldened me to ask for more. One thing that really resonates with me is you shared the mantra from Susan Jeffers, feel the fear and do it anyways. And that's something that I'm repeating to myself right now. But yeah, truly, I hope one day I can share some of these learnings and be someone else's Janice. But I am just so grateful to have met you and also just be a part of this book surrounded by so many fearless women. So thank you, Janice.
Okay, I'll go next. So I remember the question was, what did I take away from being part of this book? And I have to say, it was extraordinary. First of all, to be asked to participate, and for that I thank you, Janice. But I think the biggest gift for me was the opportunity to reflect on my long life. I think I should have more than 2 minutes. These other people are much, much younger. It's hardly fair. I have so much more to say. But I also, before I go any further, I want to thank Sonia and Michael and the whole team here. I remember coming here for the first time and feeling terribly out of place. And it was because there weren't many women here. And it's really changed. I have a new challenge for you, but I'll get into that in a moment. But so I realized that when I did this reflection, I realized how important family was, family and friends. I consider friends to be the family that I actually chose. And I see that the pictures, because I haven't seen this in a few months, well, perhaps 8 or 9, I don't even remember what I wrote. But I have pictures of myself with my brother. I have pictures of myself with my grandchildren. I realize how important family is. But I also, before I say anything else, I want to challenge everybody here. We've talked so much about diversity. In my older years, I have confronted ageism head on. And that's one of the reasons why I became an entrepreneur in my late 60s. It's because everybody is going to get old if they're lucky. And many of us, so it's a bias against your future self. And in businesses and companies and organizations, when we discriminate against older adults, we're discriminating against our future. And there's a demographic shift right now. We need to take advantage of the experience and expertise of older people. And we also have to think of older entrepreneurs, such as myself. I'd love to feel like I belonged here that much more. So thank you.
All right. So I guess we have 2 minutes. So for me, I felt like, first of all, I didn't even know how I was going to participate, because I've always been one of those people who I don't like to talk mostly about myself, but I like my work to talk for itself. Because for the longest time, I felt like my journey has been about the people that I left behind and the young girls and boys that are sitting in the middle of a refugee camp. And therefore, we need to work harder to create progress. And it can't be, let's keep doing what we're doing. Yes, sure. But when most of us go to bed, it's urgent because we know that there's a young girl somewhere who's sitting and wondering who's going to come for me. And I've always felt like that. So for me, I would like to go through a little, right? Because it was a lot of reflection for me that made me cry a lot when I was writing just these 2 pages. So I said, I watch mothers cry for the survival of their children, grown men feel hopeless, children become orphans, and millions of people facing disparity, disease, violence, and exploitation. Living through those moments came with the greatest lesson in my life, that pain knows no color, ethnicity, or nationality. Hate has no place in our society, and in that moment as a child, I would commit to making this world a better place. As I made that commitment, I would also realize that for the longest time in my life, I would have a hard time knowing where I belong. I felt like I really didn't belong. I was a young girl who became Canadian from New Brunswick, imagine in all places. And for most of the time, I grew up and I realized this big dream of creating Elevate International, which was to really tackle what leadership looked like. Because I finally realized that for the most kids in the world who are wondering what the future is going to look like for us, we really needed to change what senior executive looked like. And when I walked in most people's boardroom, most of the time, they thought I was raising funds for a young girl in Africa, or I was trying to help immigrant women. They couldn't really fathom the idea that I was tackling senior leadership in the entire world. So for me, Janice, you made me believe that I knew where I belong. I no longer belonged in what people thought of me. I belonged in my purpose. And for as long as I sit in this purpose that I've been given, no one will ever be able to see this vision and dream of making this world better for women and girls.
Thank you. Thank you, each of you, for sharing, and also, again, for all the remarkable women in the room that participated in the book. So thank you again.
Thank you so much to Janice for your contribution to our Female Founder and Women-Owned Business Subcommittee, to our community. I've had the pleasure of working with all 3 of the women that you had on the stage and would love the opportunity to work with Katie Telford in future. Amazing leaders. Helen, an award-winning entrepreneur, Solange, launching an organization that I believe in so strongly. I'm so privileged to sit on the board of Elevate International, and we are proud to support you as a community. And Erin, you are a rock star that is crafting the programs. You are already a Janice, a leader in your own right, so please don't ever forget that. You're amazing. And it is now my pleasure to invite forward to the stage Sheena Brady, who is the founder and CEO of Tease Tea, the Founders Fund. She was just on our stage sharing her entrepreneurial journey with Talisa Daughtry with the U.S. Embassy just a few days ago. Please join me in welcoming her to introduce our keynote panel.
I know we've done it already, but we do have to give another round of applause to Sonia, honestly, because anybody who even has a tenth of the idea of the work that she and her team has put into everything for the past week, it is truly incredible. You have been burning the midnight oil, I know, because I have email evidence. So thank you for your hard work in putting all of this together. So as Sonia shared, my name is Sheena Brady, and I'm the founder and CEO of Tease Tea and the Founders Fund. But before I get into that, I just want to share a little bit about my upbringing. So my upbringing was a little bit complicated, to say the least. I grew up in a single-parent household with my half-sister. We moved around a lot, and we didn't have a lot of money. My upbringing was complicated, and I watched my mom struggle to just kind of get by. And at one point, I actually watched her open a home salon, only to struggle with bankruptcy a few short years later. If you looked at my upbringing and you looked at my family history, and you chose to put that into data points, technically, I probably shouldn't have ever maybe even finished high school, let alone go to college and graduate college. However, I not only graduated high school, but I became the first person in my family to go to and graduate college as well. And it's not necessarily because I'm overly ambitious or anything like that. I mean, I'd like to think I am now, but not necessarily at that time. But I was very blessed to have a family friend in my life named Louise, and I just want to give some credit to Louise. She's currently a 67-year-old woman, and she is a very strong, kind, but high expectation woman who constantly puts the needs of others first before herself to see those around her thrive. And so when I graduated from high school, I knew my reality. I probably wasn't going to go to college. I'd take a year off, save some money, and then maybe go. But Louise wasn't having any of that because in her mind, and knowing what my family had gone through previously, that if I took a year off to work, it'd be highly unlikely that I would pursue a post-secondary education at all. So with her own family's limited money, she invested in my first year of education. And I was absolutely floored. I couldn't understand why this woman invested in me with such generosity. And when I asked her why, she simply said to the 17-year-old me, because why not you? And I carried that attitude and that audacity with me throughout my career and as a young adult. And when I graduated in hospitality management, I then went on to work in some worldly cities in hospitality leadership at a very young age, followed by working at Shopify for now over 5 years in tech. So from hospitality leadership to tech, two traditionally very male-dominated spaces. And through the process of working at Shopify, through my passion tea and through purpose, I built a side hustle, which is called Tease Tea. And today, Tease Tea, I'm proud to share, is a 7-figure company that serves customers in over 30 countries. Tease Tea is a values-first company, and with every purchase, we donate to programs that are dedicated to empowering women. In 2019, my team got a lot more intentional about what this means. And so we created the first ever Founders Fund, which was built out of my personal passion to help support the next generation of budding entrepreneurs. In 2019, we basically challenged successful established entrepreneurs and said, what are you doing to pay your success forward? Can you contribute the currency of time and help mentor women entrepreneurs? Or can you contribute the currency of money and help fund women entrepreneurs? And I'm incredibly proud to share that because we all inherently have in our DNA as entrepreneurs, I fundamentally believe this, the desire to want to help pay our success forward, we were able to help support over 200 women identifying entrepreneurs across the country gain access to mentorship and resources for their business, and ultimately fund 5 companies. Thank you. We reached 11 out of the 13 provinces and territories, and we had over 40% identify as a visible minority. But why does this even matter? So BDC released some stats last year about small businesses, and though we've heard tonight we are making incredible progress in Canada, the reality is currently only 16% of all small businesses across Canada are majority owned and led by women. So though there's been a lot of progress, there is still a lot of work to do. So for International Women's Week, I want to challenge us all on what we can do to invest in women entrepreneurs. And I'm going to break it down really simple. It doesn't have to be limited to currency. I have 3 big takeaways. The first one is demonstrating allyship. This extends to not just women entrepreneurs, but women in business. It is all of our responsibility to step up and help mentor and coach, support, and nominate women for opportunities. If you see an opportunity that you think a woman would be exceptional for, tell her and say, I think you should apply for this opportunity, or I think you should go after this opportunity because you are exceptional at X. The confidence barrier is very, very real. And you may already know this, but there's data that shows that if a job post is opened, a man who only has 60% of the credentials will still apply and just go for it. And that's awesome. So we should all do. But women feel like they have to have 100% of all the requirements before they even apply. And I think that the irony is that even though women are less likely to apply for jobs in the same rate that men do, they're actually statistically more likely to get hired. So my second challenge for everyone, check your unconscious bias. We all do it, and it's okay. We all make mistakes. Just last week, I was invited to what I felt was a prestigious event. It was the United Nations Women's Luncheon Panel here in Ottawa. And at the end of the event, in a sea of corporate suits, I probably stood out a little bit. I wore some loud colors, and I might have been a little bit younger than some people in the room. And I introduced myself to one of the guests, and she immediately responded with, "Oh, are you an event organizer?" I think she was slightly embarrassed when I introduced myself and said, "No, I own 2 businesses, and I work in leadership at Shopify." And as I felt her slight embarrassment, I felt bad because, I know it was nothing but positive intent and it was completely harmless. And this is just a small example of the gender bias that continues to exist today. And of course, we saw that data point today about VC funding for women. It's gone up from 2.1% to about 2.8%. We still have a lot of work to do. We tend to naturally associate ourselves with people who look like us and people who think like us. And that is at the core a huge challenge with conscious bias. So I ask you to check that. And then finally, my third tip is to share your story. So if you've had a positive impact in your life on a woman entrepreneur or a woman in business, tell your family, tell your friends, tell your network. Why? So that they might be inspired to step up and do the same. If you are a woman who has started a business, whether it was a huge success or a failure or a combination of both along the way, tell the world. It is only that if we share our stories that we can continue to learn from each other and continue to improve. If you want to learn a little bit more about the work that our team is doing at the Founders Fund to help support and elevate and create more entrepreneurs across Canada, particularly women identifying entrepreneurs, we are here tonight and we welcome to have some conversations with you.